I said you were entertaining because somebody would come on and be like, "You're the worst. You're evil. You did this," and then you would say, "So explain to me what I did exactly." And then they would immediately not know what the hell to say. They're like, "You raised the price of the drug, and now people can't get it." You're like, "Tell me, who can't get it? Where are you getting that data from? Like, what?" And you would walk them through almost like the Socratic method of what actually happened, what your perspective was on it. And so I want you to share that, because I think a lot of people have heard the other perspective, which is guy buys drug, raises price, he's evil. That's one perspective. I'd like you to share your perspective, and then people can decide for themselves which they feel to be more true. So,
and you didn't even, and it was another funny part related to that, is you didn't even go to prison for that reason.
Right.
You, if I remember correctly, you admitted you were wrong for a bunch of things, but it wasn't even related.
Unrelated. Your persona was related.
Yeah. But I think you being smug and being an asshole when maybe you should have just been like, "Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry," was probably the more appropriate answer. But you were kind of like being smug, and you got a lot of shit for that. So I think that hurt your thing. But you didn't even get prosecuted for that.
No, yeah, I mean, I think that's why I was so smug, is it's not a crime to choose the price of your product. You know, if you guys wanted to charge for this podcast, right? You know, whether it's an advertiser, partner, or the listener, yeah, you can pick whatever price you want. You know, that's your call. You know, it's your job to explore the frontier of that price and volume curve. And your job to sort of find the maximum revenue. You can choose to do that or not do that. And I think that's why American capitalism is so great, is like, it's really the only person's call is the firm owner and the firm management team's call, right? It's not a politician's call. It's not the media's call. It's not the guy in the sort of grandstand's call, hooting and hollering at you. It's not even the patient's call, even though they're your core constituent and we care the most about them. It's your call as management team, right? You set that price. When you email the distributor, that's the price that matters. It's the price that you picked, and nobody can tell you what that price is. And any business
and what was that? What was that logic that Shaan was referring to?
The criticism would be yes, you had the right to raise the price. That doesn't mean you're not a jerk, or that people weren't hurt by that because they now couldn't afford it. So now address that part of it.
The reverse psychology is super important. I'll go through that in a second, but I think the most of what you said is really important, because it's this like inviolable right. And I was really pissed off, quite frankly, that there was this effort by would-be politicians that didn't end up winning, and others to try to sort of take that right away through like this regulation by embarrassment, right? Like it was like this, like, we'll shame you until you change your mind. It's like, no, you're not going to shame me into changing my mind. Like, that's insane. You're trying to take my right away. It's my right to run my business how I see fit. Now, we'll go through all the logic of why I think it was a good idea and a tenable idea. And it's not something a jerk would do. It's not something an asshole would do. But just first and foremost, how dare you try to tell me, what my price should be? Because ultimately, every person in America is working for some business that sets their price. And you're basically saying, well, if you do it to me, well, you can do it to Apple next. Or are you going to tell them that the iPhone's too expensive? Are you going to do it to your podcast where an advertiser says, oh my God, you want $50,000 to post an ad on my podcast? Well, that's not right. I want that for $25,000. No, you're not getting the ad. And, I think that there's this special difference when it comes to healthcare. And I've learned this and processed it slowly. And like I said, I'll tell you briefly about my new company in a minute. But people treat healthcare products and services in a different part of their mind. A friend of mine worked at Amex and got to talk to Buffett about this, where he said, Buffett likes businesses where consumers think about the brand with a different part of their mind. They don't think about it with the rational part. They think about it with the emotional part. And Amex is an emotional product. Coca-Cola is an emotional product. You don't think about it and say, well, this soda water costs, sugar water costs 20 cents to make. I don't know if I want to buy this for $1. You just buy the soda because you love Coca-Cola. And the more that you can make people think with that side of their brain, the better. In healthcare, you kind of get this like very visceral like entitlement of like, no, I need this drug. I don't care what it costs for the producer. I don't care this is my right to get this medicine. And obviously, that's not quite right in my opinion. So getting back to sort of just, again, getting past my just annoyance that there be people that sort of felt like, they had a right to tell you what your prices should be without knowing anything about your business in the first place. I think the biggest thing that worked, Shaan, with that Socratic method is just showing people how little they know about they're in this industry, right? Most people don't know much about the pharma industry. I don't blame them for that, right? This is the industry that I spent my life in. To know that it's an ins and out of pharma, I'd be surprised if anybody did. So the first thing I tend to ask is, well, what price do you think product should be? And this is sort of where like it all falls apart for the interlocutor, because the average pharmaceutical price would shock most people. There are rare disease drugs like Spinraza and the Avexis product for SMA. They're millions of dollars. It's $1 million for a drug a year. So every year for the rest of your life, you got to pay $1 million. There are drugs like that.
But you don't pay it necessarily out of pocket, right?
Nobody's paying out of pocket for anything. That's it.
It's the cost of the drug to the insurance company, not to the end patient.
Correct. We have this convoluted, crazy system that generally needs to kind of be broken in half. But and again, I'll show you my product in a minute. That unlike Mark Cuban's garbage, might actually help. The first question I always ask people is like, well, where do you price a drug where you have? I had a drug at Retrophin, 60 people took it, 60, and they needed it to save their life. What price should that be? Should it be the price of Viagra? No. I believe in this thing called utility theory of price, which I probably studied in economics a long time ago, but forgot. But this idea is that price has 3 or 4 different theories of price. There's theory of kind of value, there's theory of utility, and there's sort of other types of theories like it should cost. A lot of people sort of like would give me their theories in lay terms like, well, it should cost what you made it plus a comfortable margin. I was like, okay, that sounds interesting. And other people would say, well, it should cost what it's worth to the user. And that's kind of how most medicine is priced. If you can forego some terrible operation, then, and that operation is really expensive, by taking this medicine, it should sort of cost the price of you foregoing that operation. And it's like, but for analysis, right? So for a lot of rare diseases, it's like, well, but for this drug, you would be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. So it's kind of a bargain at say $100,000, because otherwise the insurance is going to spend $500,000 on you, going to the hospital every week and so forth and so forth. If you price it based on what it would cost, like, okay, well, price it at a break even. Well, not a lot of incentive to make a medicine like that, right? You want this windfall profit if you're a drug company, because you have this risk that this shit's not going to work. And then, you'll be applying to a job at Pfizer, after your biotech startup fails. So if you do win, you can't just break even. You have to overcome the risks and the risk adjusted possibility that you would have failed. Otherwise, nobody would invest in companies like this if all the benefit was you would break even. So you have to have this extra return. And so when you do the pricing, I think that the best logical thing to do is pick a price that the alternative care, in other words, a world without this drug, you would forego all those costs for this drug. And so I think that price works. There are people who are, just legitimately out of their mind that say, oh, the drug should just be free. And of course, who's going to pay for the office? Who's going to pay for lawyers? Who's going to pay for the accountants? Who's going to pay for
the next
research?
Who's going to pay for the next drug, right? If every drug is free, then nobody's going to want to go make drugs.
And again, if that's the system society dictated to me, I'll follow those rules. But the system society dictated was, it's your choice what to price your product at. It's the insurer's choice to pay for it. It's the doctor's choice to prescribe it. And there are countries like there's this miracle drug by Vertex, one of my favorite drug companies, for cystic fibrosis. Miracle product, literally cure for cystic fibrosis. Amazing. Cystic is no longer a medical problem for 90% of people with cystic fibrosis. This company should have parades every year for it, right? But instead, they get shit for it. And I have friends that their lives have been saved. One of my friends in high school died of cystic fibrosis at 19. And these guys are doing, I use this term very carefully, God's work by saving people with CF. There are countries that refuse to pay for the medicine rate because it's $300,000 a year. And my drug, I ask people all the time, well, how much is my drug? Well, I say, I need $750 a pill. That's not what I'm asking. In pharma, we don't worry about what the price per bill is. We worry about what does it cost for somebody to have to pay for this medicine, not out of pocket. What is the insurance paying for a full course or full year, right? And they say, well, I don't know. How many pills do you have to take when you take this drug that you raise the price of? And I said, well, why are you ready to criticize me when you don't know what the total cost is? You're already jumping down.
But you know why they're criticizing you, which is like, as I'm listening to this you talk, like you have this very classic issue, which is both an asset and a liability, which is you're quite logical. So you're like, this one guy, I forget the guy's name, the guy who's running for president, he just did what I did and he did it times 10, but I did it early on, which is like you followed a very logical thing, which is we hear this all the time and we have friends like this where it's like, well, I thought it could work because of X, Y, and Z. And in most people's heads, they would say to themselves, yeah, but no one else is doing it. Therefore, it's impossible. In your head, which is a very common thing in entrepreneurs like you, which is no, like if A, then B, then C. Like it's a very logical approach. But where you have fucked up is you weren't, it's like you're so smart at studying the logic that you also kind of fucked up by studying like, okay, but if I do that, then people will hate me. Therefore, I should probably use these words or smile this way when they confront me. And like, that was like it's kind of like what Elon's doing. It's like, dude, you're so fucking smart, Elon. You're doing all this amazing shit. Don't call Twitter titter. Like, think of a different troll that's a net positive, not a net negative. And that was what it seemed like was your thing, which is like, yeah, dude, you're logical. You're not wrong about this, this, and this. But you're just being a fucking idiot when you're talking about it, and you're not like what? Don't smile that way in Congress. Hand, even if you're,
I respect it because I'm like, I think and I'm sure you were told by people what the correct way to frame and spin this is, and it's what every executive does. So
I can be just like the guy at Pfizer,
right?
Just like it, right? And I can,
and I think it's cool that you're not that guy, but it's like,
well, that's the issue.
You could have saved 7 years of your life maybe and only gotten like less. If you just would have been just like be a little bit more likable sometimes to save your own ass.
And sure, and you know, I wanted to straddle that line, but like how much, or like when I talk at Ivy League schools, I get standing ovations because I think that the kids realize that their personality is about to be choked out by the big pharma, big corporate world, right? Whether they're going to pharma or they're going to finance, their life is over. You know, their ability to express themselves the way they see fit is done, right? Their ability to wear what they want to work is over. And I think that I represent that breath of fresh air. That's like, okay, maybe you can actually keep a personality. Maybe you can actually be somebody real instead of, you know, look at the average CEO of corporate America. Look at the Budweiser CEO, Anheuser-Busch CEO. It's like, no, I got to say what is the least interesting and the least offensive possible road to walk. And I can't have a real personality because if I do, you know, someone's going to have an issue with it and it's going to be a problem for my business. And I just hate that the corporate world has gotten to that point where, you know, showing who you are or the kind of person you are or having an opinion of any kind can be held against you.
I agree. And the world wants you to be vanilla. Look, this is why people like our pod. I also see the other side where it's like, yeah, dude, but you just fucked up all those, like, I don't know if this is true, but maybe it is. You just messed up all the people who wanted this drug because you got locked up or you hurt your family or you hurt people who cared about you all because of you wanting to express yourself. If you want to express yourself, get a fucking dog, go hang out with your cat, like talk to them. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's that
let me ask
other
one
argument.
Question. One question that's really important. How many people could not afford or were not able to access the drug that previously could when the price was lower because the price got raised? Was it 1%, 10%, 50%, 75% of people could no longer afford the drug? Because that's the key, right?
0%.
And so that's the thing that, like, you know,
not how far it works.
So explain that part, because I think that's the key consideration. Is if you raise the price of the drug and these people who needed it to pay for their illness could no longer afford it, and now they were sort of out, you know, shit out of luck because you bought the drug and decided to reprice it, that would have been one thing. I think that would support the argument against, in a way, at least the emotional argument against. But when you add the fact that nobody lost access to the drug, or a very small percentage, if that's true, I don't know if it's true. I don't do the research on this, but you're saying that that's true. That completely changes the argument, in my opinion.
I think so too, and that's why, like, I was so bold and to Sam's point, you know, seemingly like tone deaf, right, about this, because I wanted people to see, well, this is not a stupid person. Why is he being so tone deaf and obstinate? Hopefully it's because he's right. And let me look into that. And some people did, you know, and that's why I've got fans. And I'm not Billy McFarland or somebody like that. You know, I'm able to raise money and start a new business because, you know, I accomplish things and I'm a skilled guy. It's this like failure it's this desire to want to buy a narrative from media or buy anger or rent anger, that sort of accumulated here. People, when it comes to medicine, like I said, there are drugs far more expensive than Daraprim, and like $500,000 or more per year. Daraprim's a one course, right? So there's not an insurer in the world that didn't cover Daraprim, because if you don't pay the $50,000 roughly what Daraprim costs for a whole course, forget per pill, about $50,000 if you end up needing Daraprim. if you don't pay that, you're going to pay for the guy's funeral. You're going to pay for his ICU visits. You're paying for his, you're going to pay for $1 million of this guy being in the ICU for the next 6 months. It doesn't make sense, right? Financially to not pay for Darabrim. The other thing is it's such a small medicine. This was less than 0.1% of an insurer's budget, right? It's fucking not even a policy is being formed at Aetna or United Healthcare because it's like, no, they have automated policies for this stuff. Like until the drug ends up being like a couple more basis points, several dozen basis points, it's just not going to be a factor, right? They're more worried about is somebody taking insulin when they could be taking metformin, which is much cheaper, right? Make 20,000 people move from insulin to metformin, or 50,000 or 500,000 people. Our policy is you got to take OTC before you get this expensive prescription. That's the kind of policies health insurers care about. Again, you wouldn't know that unless you're in the healthcare industry, right? And the problem is when you have people that are shooting at you, and they don't know what your industry is about, it's akin to me telling like a database programmer, well, NoSQL databases are better than SQL databases. And he's like, why? Why are you saying that? Well, and he starts putting out all these data. I'm like, oh, that's just how I feel. It's better to have a NoSQL than a SQL. It's like, I wouldn't do that because I'm not that intellectually dishonest. But people are very willing to be intellectually dishonest when it comes to things they don't know about because, it's a personal thing. And again, my goal is to better understand how personal healthcare is to people, that it actually is this cherished good and service. It's not like food. It doesn't have the elasticity of other things. It's a very unique product that we put in a different place. And, my new company has sort of an effort to sort of understand that, make amends, make penance in a way, because I think that, again, healthcare is one of these goods that, unlike most other goods, there's the marginal demand for marginal healthcare is virtually infinite. Well, amongst the three of us, nobody is willing to sacrifice marginal healthcare, right? You and I are probably willing to sacrifice marginal, clothing, right? There's only so much money I'm going to spend on clothing. There's only so much money I'm going to spend on this or that. But if you had infinite money, like the thing you'd probably prioritize is your health, your livelihood and well-being. And I think that makes it kind of the special good and service. And that's why we've gone from spending 5% of our GDP on healthcare to 20%. And I think that's going to go to 50% over time because our basic goods and needs, our Maslowian kind of needs are met. We can eat, we can have shelter, et cetera, et cetera. We ultimately just want to live forever. There's the reason why the Silicon Valley trillionaires, they want longevity, right? They want they want to be around forever because, Larry Ellison, who I grew up kind of, a little bit fanboying or worshiping, his life goal is to live forever and he's not going to make it. But this idea that all these guys sort of have in their minds that if they spend their billions, they'll live forever. It's there because they love their life, right? The average person in Africa probably doesn't think about it that way. I think they like to, but their life is a lot harder. In America, we're really lucky. We want to live forever because of that. And I think that makes health, one of these things where it's demand side driven. We like to think that healthcare expenses are going up because of people like me or people like the Mylan CEO, the Pfizer CEO. They're going up because we all demand healthcare. We want health for everyone, our families, our friends, our progeny. We all want healthcare, we're going to consume more and more of it over time.